Grüß Agus Felche. Hello and welcome to the Heathen Coalition Midsummer video. I'm your host Dawn, and I'm going to be talking to you all about the most mystical herbs to gather on St. John's Eve. Seeds are also considered more potent at this time, and the healing properties of plants in general. It is best to plant and harvest on this day if you can. St. John's Eve takes place on June 23rd, and then his feast day is the 24th. This probably has to do with the birth of the sun. So this video was sparked by just a jinkies moment by looking up random words in my old Webster dictionary. This is a couple hundred years old and very heavy. According to this dictionary, the heathen need fire has Teutonic origins, but this was later replaced by St. John's fire. And according to the book Odin's Wife by William Reeves, that these festivals were long considered heathen in origin is evident by the number of edicts concerning them. The Council of Constantinople in Trullo in 680 AD expressly forbids kindling need fires, as did the Synod of Rome in Leptina in the year 743. Older but more specific is the testimony of Eligius, 600 AD, who writes, "No one at the feast of St. John or any of the holy feasts of the summer solstice may dance or recite songs of the devil." So this is a common theme with holidays that have pagan origins, is we can tell the origins based on what they're banning. These bonfires are still taking place all over the world, including Scandinavia. In Norway, in fact, they have the largest bonfire in the world. It takes 2 months or more to set it up. Fires may have originally been dedicated to the god Balder. Sir James Frazer wrote in his book The Golden Bough that in Sweden the Eve of St. John or St. Hans is the most joyous night of the whole year. Especially in the provinces of Bohus and Scania, in the districts bordering on Norway, it is celebrated by frequent discharge of firearms and by huge bonfires, formerly called Balder's balefires, which are kindled at dusk on hills. In parts of Norland on St. John's Eve, the bonfires are lit at the crossroads. The fuel consists of 9 different sorts of wood, and the spectators cast into the flames a kind of toadstool, in order to counteract the power of trolls and other evil spirits, who are believed to be abroad that night. In Lithuania, paganism is still going strong, and so this is one of the best examples of how we may have celebrated these things. They have a kupol instead of a maypole, but it's quite similar. They'd wear oak leaf crowns because that is the tree of the thunder god, oak. During June, they honor the goddess Litha as well as Perkunos, the god of thunder.
Jonas's name day is a big celebration in Lithuania. It predates long before Christianity came. It was a celebration of the longest day of the year, and the celebration was where the whole community came together and prepared to greet the sun to come back.
They may call it St. John, but really we can tell it has pagan origins by the fact that the celebration has 2 names in a lot of places, such as in Lithuania, it is called St. Jonas Day. I'm making a traditional Lithuanian wreath for Jonas Day, Vanikos. And people say they protect homes from all kinds of bad things. But Razos, or Feast of the Dew, was the original term for this festival.
When Christianity came in, they demonized the god of thunder. They made him the evil god.
Folk customs across Europe involve gathering the dew. You would roll around in the dew, wash your face with dew for beauty. The Grimm brothers mention in their book Teutonic Mythology, in a spring near Nogent, men and women bathed on St. John's Eve. Holberg's comedy of Kilderisen is found on the Copenhagen people's practice of pilgriming to a neighboring spring on Hans Often to heal and invigorate themselves in its waters. On Midsummer Eve, the people of Ostergotland journeyed according to ancient custom to Lagman's Berkala near Skenning and drank of the well. And it also says in a little footnote right beneath this that where the heathens ascribed the miraculous power of a spring to their wood or water sprites, the Christians afterwards transferred it to their saints. In Austria, the solstice fire, Sonnenwendfeuer, also has a name of Johannesfeuer, or John's fire. In Ireland, this festival is called Bonfire Night, or Bonfire, Tín Canal. And one of the traditions would be to take an ember from the flames, once it's cooled and throw this in your field when you get home from the party. Another Irish tradition on St. John's Eve would be to stay up all night long and watch the fires and guard over the place and celebrate. Well, it's not surprising that the Celts would have been staying up all night. That's why we celebrate the eve of holidays in the first place. Pagans considered the day to begin the night before. In Ireland on St. John's Eve, they used to gather at Knock An, or the Hill of An, and light little wisps. She is called Anya of the Wisps. Here you have a solar goddess that they would gather and celebrate. According to a folk tale recorded by D. Fitzgerald in Popular Tales of Ireland, Volume 4, one time a number of girls were staying late at the festivities to watch over the torches when the goddess Anya suddenly appeared to them and thanked them for honoring her. Anya told the girls, however, that she wanted the hill to themselves, lifted up a magical ring, and when the girls looked through the ring, they could see spirits all around them. In Greece, the tradition is called Clydenus, and they also jump over the fires for luck and to show their courage. The name Clydenus comes from the ancient Greek word kleidon, meaning prophecy or a prophetic sign. And the modern Greek word kleidi refers to a key. Keys can also be seen as representative of fortune telling because you're unlocking the truth. Certain herbs are just more midsummery than others. One of the main herbs that used to be hung in the doorways for protection is St. John's wort. I do believe that this originally might have been Balder's wort, or an herb dedicated to a solar god. The botanical name for St. John's wort is Hypericum, which the Iric part of that is heath, so it comes from the Greek over the heath, plants that they would place above religious idols. Even the plant family itself has a kind of heathenish name. Midsummer garlands are used to protect from spells and curses and to bless and give you luck. In places like Russia, Slovakia, Czech, and Poland, you would place your wreath in the water, and then the path that the wreath took would foretell the owner's future. In Eastern Germany, the wreaths would be thrown overhead into trees to define the future. In Poland, there is even a festival called Wianki. At midsummer, wreaths are very important. Long ago, in pagan times, they would fashion their wreaths and then throw it in the river. And if a boy went to go fetch your wreath, then he would be the one to marry you. In Germany, they would fashion wreaths out of vervain and mugwort, and then once they left the festivities, they would throw this into the fire, saying, "May my bad luck burn as these burn." In Bohemia, they would make their crowns out of mugwort. Artemisia is also named after the Greek goddess Artemis of the moon. In German, mugwort was also called midsummer girdle or midsummer belt, meaning a wreath. Apparently St. John is quite the matchmaker. There's different charms regarding love divination, that you should take 7 different flowers from 7 different fields, put them under your pillow in places like Finland and Sweden, and then you will dream of your future husband. According to folklore, you must include the herbs of St. John's wort and Balder's brow. The mayweed is called Balder's brow. The kvast was used for protection, which is another form of magic. You would hang them in the house or throw them in the fire, along with all these other herbs. Another mystical plant to gather during midsummer is midsummer men, or orpine, also called witches' money bags. The orpine would also be used to foretell the future, because you would take 2 plants, one representing you and one representing your lover, and you would put them next to each other on St. John's Eve. The following morning, whether they drooped towards each other meant maybe you were going to be married sooner. If you drifted opposite directions, probably not going to marry that guy. So they'd interpret what the orpine plants were doing in order to foretell the future of their relationships. Another plant that is very sacred to gather during midsummer is the fern.
The fern is the magical fern that blooms that night, only at midnight, and the one that finds it will be the luckiest person in the world.
Here is a Lithuanian woman explaining the folklore of the magical fern plant. Here in Lithuania, there is a tradition to look for the flower of fern at night, while waiting for the morning of Jojonas. This flower is a mystical thing, which maybe doesn't exist, but it exists in these traditions. In fact, it was believed that lucky St. John's hands were created out of the fern. I would just call it a lucky hand and leave the St. John part out, but you would dig up a male fern during midnight on St. John's Eve, June 23rd, cut off all of the little roots except for 5. Then you would burn the lucky hand for a little bit in your midsummer fires, so it's blessed by the fire, and you'd keep it as a talisman that would protect you from all sorts of ills. In Romania, there is a festival to honor the fairy folk of their culture. Sanzani, the holiday itself, is the same word for fairies as it is for Gallium Verum. In Scandinavia, this plant is also sacred, and it is called Frigga's grass, or lady's bedstraw, because it was used to help with childbirth. The pre-Christian origins of these traditions on St. John's Eve are quite clear. Nice try to the church for trying to stamp it out, but solar festivals aren't going anywhere. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have an enchanted summertide and are able to gather all the magical herbs that your heart desires.